Okay, hello everyone. For real this time, it's happening. Thank you all so much for coming out here to the Atwater Library on this freezing cold but really beautifully clear and starry night for the launch of our fabulous new issue. My name is Malcolm Fraser, and somehow I'm the new editor of this publication. Freshly anointed. We have Melanie Grondin here, who's moving on from the MRB after a number of years. We will have more to say about that at a later time. We have Rebecca West here, a publisher who's been working so hard on this holiday book fair. So let's give her a little hand. We have David LeBlanc, our designer. We have Athena Khalid, our new associate editor. It's a family affair. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to all the folks at home tuning in. I want to start just by giving tribute to the fact that we're gathered here in this place known as Tiohtià in the Kanien'kehá:ka language and as Munyang in the language of the Anishinaabe. Our publication represents a whole diverse community who live and work on the territories of many Indigenous peoples, including the Kanien'kehá:ka, Abenaki, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat. As a publication who celebrate local books and writers, we want to honor the first storytellers of these lands. And I want to add that let's give this honor not just as a gesture, but as a practice in our day-to-day lives. I want to thank our partners for this event: the Quebec Writers Federation, Paragraph Bookstore, the Violet Hour, a principal funder, the Government of Canada, and our sponsors, Babar Books, Penguin Random House, and the Montreal Gazette. And of course, I want to thank the Atwater Library for hosting this event. Well, let's get on with the main event. Our new print issue is out with a really fabulous cover photo by Stacy Lee. I'm very happy with the issue. A few people have been asking us when the issue is going to be online, and it's going to be very soon. We have been redesigning the Montreal Review of Books website. It's going to be launching any day now. With you can find the feature articles, the interviews with our readers tonight, and a few other things at the old site. But the full issue and some online exclusive special things are going to be up on our new site very, very soon. Stay tuned for it. But for now, I want to introduce our first reader, Eli Tarek L. Bechelany-Lynch. Their work has been longlisted for the CBC Poetry Prize in 2019. Their book, Not Body, was published by Metatron in 2020. And their latest book, The Good Arabs, was published by Maisonneuve Press in September of this year. They'll be reading from that. Welcome, Eli.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here in person, and I'm glad that folks online get to also be here with us. Yeah, I'm really excited to be in this issue, and it does look great. Tara looks great on the cover, so I was stoked to see that. I'm going to be starting with a poem called In the Heart of More Garbage, which is after Etel Adnan's In the Heart of Another Country, which I'm reading because, well, in honor of her and her recent passing a couple days ago, which feels like pretty intense as, you know, like a queer Lebanese elder who just passed. So this is for her and how I'm going to start the reading. So this is, I'm starting halfway through the poem though. In the heart of more garbage. You see men throwing large garbage bag. You see men throwing large black bags of garbage over the sides of mountains to places you can't see. Imagine a small child playing outside, screaming in fear as they rain down on his family field, mutilating the work, weeks of sweat and sun, weeks of unripe bananas, squashed in the dry dirt, falling onto trees, figs hitting the ground, purple breaking to reveal thick red lines of ants in formation, a feast they'll bring back to their queen. The cigales in the south of France return like a fever dream, back from the insides of memories, barely legible, but the soft salmon of early sky, sun rising into newness, the darkness filled with country stars, the energy in the air so charged with cigale, so heavy with muteness, the twinkling of the stars quiet yet so loud. It happened in the fullness of my mouth around a mango, the yellow juices leaking down my chin. You tell me I can no longer smell the sandalwood incense in the studio without thinking that someone just had a shit and is trying to mask the smell. So the myth goes like this. The little juribon, the little mangy one, climbs the mountain tirelessly. No, wait a second, that's not right. Actually, she screamed from the top of the cliff. People shall call me Asad, she said. People shall look on differently. People shall not throw things from my throne. Peace will be present and devotional. People throw garbage into the Mediterranean Sea at capacity. The garbage shipped off to Russia, but not really. Who will buy our garbage when it's too much? Who to pay for garbage removal? Men, fake companies, pretend to move the garbage from one side of the country to the other, take the money and run. The beach is no longer what they used to be. Garbage on the buoy, garbage on the expensive beach, garbage in the docks, garbage on the free beach, garbage in the mouths of seagulls, garbage between your toes, garbage on the sea-doo, garbage on the roofs of old Mercedes, garbage on the hoods of buses. The summer so hot, almost sickly sweet. What if the day of garbage has finally come? Will the seas part again? Walls of garbage consuming the lands. She holds her prayer beads up, high above her head. The second coming, Jesus looking a little darker than the photo hung in her living room. The smell of jasmine wafts into your living room, facing Champagnat. The smell of lilacs in the bags under your pillows. The smell of lilacs in the alleys and the Park X sunsets, more purple than any in the rest of the city. We sit on the balcony and you tell me, look, look, have you seen how purple my purple heart is now? My cousin runs out of the car to the middle of the highway, raises his hands up straight, and before we know it, he's gone in a crowded van, riding away to the sounds and smells of garbage. So this next one is called The Cycle. The Cycle. 1. These days, I see capitalism written plainly in every poem, though the poetry masters say, show, don't tell. But if we were to show this indiscernible void, the make-believe pieces of paper, sometimes coin, that make the world go, not round, but into the hands of the few, would this change how you see this intoxication with power? 2. He looks up from his food, a hamburger between 2 slices of bread, and asks as though this were the most important question. Will Teta have enough khubuz to eat back home? 3. Article 534 of the Lebanese Penal Code prohibits having sexual relations that are contradicting the laws of nature, which is punishable by up to a year in prison. As a practical matter, enforcement of the law has been varied and often occurs through occasional police arrests. That is to say, this law was put in place by the French government in the early 1900s. They say a relic, I say a shift in the century, a matter of public privacy. She says, I beshum, which means we have absorbed their respectability. 4. These days, I see more people looking for work. It is unavailable. Those of us in the service industry must risk our lives or risk our lives. There's never really a choice. One way or another, they will ultimately claim us. Who are they? We don't even know. The facelessness makes them undetectable. 5. I marvel at the care I find in my neighbors, in my friends, and the people on the internet tweeting dark jokes that sustain me through another day. This weakness in us, in you, in me, is not a weakness, but a sickness, not always of our own making. We try our best to help each other, but they do not let us. Tents are destroyed, shelters must be sober, the snow falls for the first time, and though the streets glimmer white, it is not a good omen. 6. One day there is money, the next there is not. The value plummets, though the pieces of paper still look the same. The lira sitting in my old wallet, hidden away. 7. The riots begin, a consequence of so much death. It only makes sense. We debate whether this is the right recourse or not. This is not up for debate. What is the difference between objects and people? When we turn certain people into objects, we become monsters, ugliness seen not in the way we look, but in our hearts, drying up yellow quickly. Redirect our attention. 8. The death of one political man means nothing. I would say woman or person, but it is almost always a man. They replace one man with another, and it is always the same. This time it is in our faces, escalated. Some of us adapt. The men are starving, but not for food. This insatiable hunger leaves us wanting more. 9. But what is a homosexual who is not a homosexual outdoors, not indoors, not in private? But what is an Arab who is not a homosexual, who is not an Arab, who is not a homosexual? Read, you may only transition if you have the surgery. That is to say, you must become one of us. 10. Read, a year in prison. Read, the police are called. Read, the bars are raided. Read, acts contradicting the laws of nature. Read, at the hands of the police. Read, and the military. Read, I will not describe to you what violations occur, what a prison looks like, if only to stop the violence from reoccurring on the page. Thank you.
Thank you, Eli. That's great. Without further ado, I'll just invite up our next reader. Helen Chau Bradley is a writer and musician, and also a contributor to the MRB at times, a valued member of the family. They are the author of Automatic Object Lessons, a poetry chapbook. They are the fiction editor for this magazine and the host of Strange Futures, a speculative fiction book club. Personal Attention Roleplay, a collection of short stories, is their first book, and they'll be reading from it right now. Welcome, Helen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the intro, Malcolm, and thank you for having me. Yes, so this is my book of short stories, Personal Attention Roleplay, and None of the stories are short enough to read within the allotted time, so I'll give you a preview excerpt of one of them. The story is called Surface Dive. Slipping into the clear, pungent water is easy, like it used to be. The tiles are smooth and reliable, a regular grid beneath her feet. The sun beats through the windows, set high near the ceiling, illuminating every corner of the pool. Light squiggles on the water as swimmers in pastel bathing caps churn up and down the lanes. It is not the lake, she reminds herself. Everything in the community center pool is visible, knowable. The water is soft and warm, a gentle turquoise bath. The pace clock keeps time in the corner, its 4 arms turning like a patient windmill, yellow, red, green, blue, simple as kindergarten. She chooses the fast lane. She's never been tentative, was always the kid nabbing the first spot in line at the high dive, always called first guard when on duty, always bounded into the bone-chilling lake before anyone else when the spring ice broke open. Snapping her goggles into place, she considers the rhythmic back and forth of the other swimmers and launches herself from the wall at the correct interval. Good, she thinks, letting herself glide below the surface before the first pull of the arms, the first whip of the legs. No sign of panic in her chest, no sign of the full body rattling that overtook her after that last swim. The fast lane is moving at a satisfying speed. The swimmer ahead manages a clipped, measured butterfly. There is no crowding at the ends of the lane. Exhaling a thick stream of bubbles, she welcomes the underwater muffle, punctured by spurts of echoing noise each time she rises to inhale. She delights at the efficiency of her own motions. Her limbs and lungs have locked into rhythm without her having to think about it. Turning at the end of the lane, she glimpses the teen lifeguard, red vest unchanged since her own days on the high throne. Pull, pull, breathe. Pull, pull, breathe. Pull, pull, breathe. As she swam through that other water, the sunset cast a glinting golden path to that bobbing head. Head up front crawl was what you were supposed to do to keep the person in sight. It may look like they are trying to climb an invisible ladder, she'd been told in her National Lifeguard Service course years before. It may not look the way you think it would. Keep your gaze focused, don't waste any time. Reading alone on the dock before dinner, she'd glanced up to see someone thrashing in the middle of the bay. She'd screamed for help and launched herself from her deck chair into the lake with the same breath. It could have been just another one of her grandmother's disturbing stories, told in an urgent whisper in the quiet afternoon when the other adults were off drinking cocktails on the dock. A favorite great uncle drowned during a swim to Lone Pine Point. He was fit, made the distance easily every day of every summer, until. It was a terrible shock to everyone, Grandma said. No one could recognize his bloated body when it was found. You should never swim in the evening after eating. You should never swim without someone watching you from the dock. And keep an eye out for strangers lurking around the property. It could have been foul play, you never know. Their family had supposedly owned the cottage and the land it stood on since the early 20th century. Grandma and the other adults had an irritating suspicion of trespassers, of people from town, or vagabonds infiltrating the woods, stealing swims in the lake. It was a shared attitude among all the cottagers in the area. A kayak paddle would go missing at the Dorians or the McEacherns, and the phone in the kitchen would start ringing frantically, neighbors shouting down the line about padlocks and security cameras and mandatory visitor passes. But she looked forward to cottage time every summer, to the sweet scent of sun-drenched rock and the slow creak of the rowboat and the moody blue-green lake, so easy to disappear into. She searched for signs of the great uncle who sometimes appeared as a smudged face in a photo full of smudged faces, easy to overlook. Is that him? She remembers asking her father, sitting beside him on the scratchy cottage couch. Is that who? He seemed puzzled, turned to the filmy page of the photo album. Turn it back. Great Uncle Edmund. Grandma said that was him in the photo. when she came up last year. Her father had looked at her blankly. The one who drowned, I mean. She said sometimes she could still see him swimming in the lake. But Grandma's memory was notoriously unreliable. Don't scare your sister, she was told. Don't scare the cousins. No more grandma stories. No more great Uncle Edmund. Kick, kick, evenly, without bending the knees. Kick from the hips. Kick, kick. Don't splash. Don't think about foot cramps. Never think about those. Her head up front crawl was still strong, even though she hadn't lifeguarded for a couple of years. Hold on, she yelled, face lapped by waves. Just hold on, I'm coming. Who could the person be? She could make out short gray hair, an open mouth, gaping at water level. An older man, she guessed. He looked somehow familiar. Maybe he was a guest of the second cousins down the lake, a more distant relation. He was farther out than she had initially thought. Should have taken one of the boats, she cursed herself. His head was now underwater more often than above. He was splashing less. He wasn't shouting. Drowners were often silent, she'd been told. She propelled herself frantically forward, her thighs burning with effort. In the lane beside hers, a swimmer, sleek as a seal, pushes off the wall, slices down through the water, grazing the distant tiles of the deep end. She watches him from above, skimming her way along the surface. It's as if they are both flying, catching different eddies of air, him below, her above. She could pass directly over him, and he wouldn't know it. Or maybe he'd catch her shadow scudding along the bottom. She can see him so clearly through the water, every brief twitch of muscle along his back, the ripple of his swim trunks as he finally allows himself a frog kick, the stream of bubbles behind him as he rises back up. The movements of the man in the lake were graceless and chaotic, the water choppy and almost opaque. If I can just make it to him, she thought, it will be fine, we'll be fine. She paused upright, treading water and catching her breath at the spot where he should have been, where she'd seen his head surfacing moments before. She should have been able to locate him, grab him firmly around the waist. A pia carry, she'd done them so many times in drills. Was that the flash of a flailing arm? But when she reached for him, her hands met nothing but each other, clasped and clasped at emptiness. Never think of the lake, is the rule, while swimming out to the point alone. Never think of the green water and what it hides, of how on an overcast day the green darkens to black, making it impossible to see more than inches below the surface. How your arms become ghostly, pulling and pulling in the lightless void so that it suddenly seems impossible that your body could float, could propel itself through the cold liquid nothing to the safety of the shore. In the pool, her serenity gives way to panic. She forgets which stroke she's been doing, the movements of her muscles suddenly uncoordinated and meaningless. What about air, her brain jolts? What about breathing? She swallows a stinging throatful of water, has to grab the rough rope of the lane marker, coughing and spitting. She gestures the swimmer behind her to pass, pass. The lifeguard looks over, but she signals that she's fine. She launches herself back into the flow of the lane. Freestyle, at least 4 more laps, she orders herself, easy as walking. In the lake, she swam in circles around the area where she'd seen him last. How could his body have sunk so quickly? She gulped a great lungful of air and plunged down to the unlit depths. Straight down, a vertical dive, scanning for the glow of flesh, feeling for the solidity of limbs, the round knock of a head, a straggle of hair. Part of her was aware that the sun was nearing the horizon, that soon the gold-flecked water would become lightless and unescapable. If I can complete a perfect flip turn at the end of this lap, she thinks, then I'll be safe. Everything will realign. The worst mistake, she knows, is to overcalculate. She commands herself not to think about it, to just let her muscle memory take care of the motions. But already now she's uncertain. She's starting to somersault on the wrong stroke, a touch too far from the wall, so that she has to kick awkwardly as she turns over, has to reach her legs for the end of the lane when they ought to hit the wall in tandem with decisiveness. And here she is, twisting sideways to complete the motion, having to shove herself off of the wall with one foot, slow and inefficient. There's water in her goggles now, blurring her vision to a chop. She's barely moving back in the opposite direction before she feels the churn of the swimmer behind her, the insistent brush of fingers against her left foot, then her right. She had arrowed downwards in one surface dive after another, willing herself through the murk to the lower layers of the lake where the waters stayed cold all year long, her arms clearing frantic circles before her, her eyes so wide open it felt as though they would spring from her face. Nothing. There was nothing. She had no idea how long she had been out there for. As she swam back towards the dock in the gathering night, shivering with cold and exertion, it was as if her body had forgotten how to stay afloat. She struggled, counting her strokes grimly in her head, tendrils of lake weeds brushing her feet. Each time they touched her, she recoiled and flailed her legs, twisted to look behind her. Was it him? Was he grabbing at her? Had he floated back to the surface now that she had given up? She wanted it to be him, but her breath caught in jagged gasps, the grasp of fingers against her calves and ankles, churning her into mindless, sinking terror.
Thank you, Helen. And speaking of mindless sinking terror, if your phone is with you, have a look, see if it might be on the silent setting. That's the way to have it in a library. People, come on. We have one more reader. She is you can see her on the cover of the new MRB. Tiohtià McGowan-Ross is an urban Mi'kmaq multidisciplinary artist and writer, host of Drawn and Quarterly's Indigenous Literature's Book Club, a critic of experimental and independent Montreal theater, and an editor at Insomniac Press. She's the author of Girth and Scorpion season and the new memoir, Nothing Will Be Different. And we're very excited to have her. Welcome, Tara.
Hello. I'm actually not the editor at Insomniac anymore. I gotta get that changed. People keep on saying that, and I'm like, it's not true. But that's my fault. Also, if your phone goes off during my reading, I won't be mad at you. It's okay. I'm just grateful it's not my phone sometimes when that happens. I'm like, oh, something was loud and it wasn't my fault. Amazing. So yeah, I'm Tara. Hi. I'm on the cover of the thing, which is the most famous I've ever felt in my entire life, which is really cool. Also, Roxanne, who wrote the article, called me Millennial Joan Didion, which means that I now have to retire to like a small town in Ontario and just like carve artisanal wooden spoons for the rest of my life because it's not going to get better than that. So that's cool. I wrote this book. It's called Nothing Will Be Different. Obviously, I can't read you a full chunk of it at all because it's I got in trouble for how long it is. So I'm going to read you like part of a section called Pagan Poetry by Bjork by Tiohtià McGowan-Ross. I also want to say that I'm going to be signing books on the 25th at the Holiday Book Fair. I'm also doing an IG Live and Instagram Live with Blue Metropolis on the 27th as to talk about the project that I did with Côte de Garance for Blue Metropolis this past festival season. So yeah. Hashtag always be plugging. Yeah, and I can sign a book with the name of the celebrity of your choice after reading whoever you want to say was here. Okay, so this is whatever, I'm just gonna start reading. Caffeine was the first place I overheard the workers speak in English to each other. The Concordia University hipsters who worked at Caffeine didn't seem like they spoke much French at all. I was at a table, listening, siphoning Wi-Fi. I hadn't heard the baristas utter so much as a syllable of French to each other or to the customers. The clientele appeared to be 99.9% Anglo-Concordia students coming in for a caffeine fix or a hot date between study sessions at the library. But the caffeine hipsters had something else that I didn't. The caffeine hipsters were cool. Coolness. In Montreal, coolness was king. In Montreal, coolness meant something altogether different than it had in Halifax. Halifax had been warm and friendly and hospitable. All of Halifax's flaws, of which there were many, were hidden beneath a baseline of politeness and warmth. My dumpiness and lack of fashion sense were written off as second fiddle in Halifax to my confidence and good attitude. My bold fashion choices were lauded as brave. Among them, my feathery mohawk hairdo, my punk-patched army fatigue pants, and, God forgive me, a bright blue John Mayer hoodie. You are an icon, said Halifax, about my outfits that clashed and did not fit. A visionary, said Halifax, when things did not flatter my figure. Work it, girl. Montreal did not want the girl to work it. Caffeine was populated by the type of hipster whose personal dramas and good looks outranked the needs of customers to do foolish things like exchange money for goods or services. When I went in to follow up about my CV, the good-looking hipster behind the counter was engrossed in a retelling of some story, just rife with exquisite drama, I'm sure, and not doing any work. I waved, and she did not respond. I waved again, and she glanced over, but kept talking. I caught her eye and smiled, and she did a short body scan of me. She was calibrating how nice she had to be to me. God, that's so mean, I thought. I want to work you so bad. Bonjour, hi, she said, bored. Hi, I'm actually just following up about the CV I dropped off, and I'm wondering if you're still looking for anyone. She did another deeper body scan. While I would be in denial about it for a few more years, rail against it, swear that no civilized society would operate this way, this was actually all of the information that I needed. I was not going to get the job. I wasn't cool enough. I didn't have hats that flipped up at the top at that time. She might not be the one calling the shots exactly, but she was telling me, based on the information she already knew as a working professional, that I was not up to snuff. I was pudgy from a summer spent sitting around eating popcorn because it was cheap and I had nothing else to do, reading books, thinking hard about exercise, and then, exhausted from thinking so hard, not exercising. I walked, sure, but mostly I drank beer, started Infinite Jest, gave up, and read The Mists of Avalon instead. I was very clearly not cool in the way a Montreal 20-year-old was supposed to be. I was retreating, dejected, when I saw a flyer on the counter. Poetry night at Caffeine. I picked it up every second Tuesday. Open mic. It was divine intervention. There was a place at Caffeine for people like me, after all. Just inside the Caffeine doors, one set of stairs led up to a cafe, while the other led into the bar. I stomped my boots to shake off the droplets of cold autumn rain stuck to them, entering the establishment on the requisite Tuesday. I took my hat off and shook it, opened and closed my hands over and over again until the feeling came back into them. The basement of Caffeine was low-ceilinged and dank. Caffeine was filled with curving vintage couches made of threadbare velvet and old wood. It was a hookah bar before it was a cafe. The basement was still haunted by a heady sense of tobacco, more of a ghost than a smell or a stain. The ghost remained after many hands ran wet things across every surface to lick the resins away, damp cotton coming away brown and then yellow and then clean. The metal stairs gonged under my boots as I descended into the warm, dark, and warm murmur of conversation. String lights twinkled off of the mahogany of the bar, the liquor bottles, and a big mirror. Tea light candles on every table threw warm, whispering, inconsistent light. The decor was made of so much old, dark wood that in the muddy image of my memory, even the air was brown as melted chocolate. People were shuffling their papers and sitting in a state of excitement or fear. Everyone was turned to each other in excited expectation, leaning forward on age-worn couches in blush pink or mustard yellow, lifting their highball glasses from the low tables in their American apparel or similar. There was other reading series happening in the city at the time. Matrix Magazine ran the Sparrow reading series on Saint Laurent. Ashley Obscura with This Is Happening Whether You Like It or Not. Poetry was being read at cafes and libraries and music venues and parties in people's living rooms. A francophone city, it was bursting with English poetry. The city of Irving Layton and Leonard Cohen, carving a whole culturate of poetry of all things. One of the least profitable artistic mediums on creator's good green earth. When I saw Andrew by the bar, before I knew his name, I saw what the coffee shop girl upstairs had not seen in me. I thought. Yes, that's what it looks like. Montreal cool. 6 feet, thin, with a jaw so wide and sharp it protruded out over his long neck. He had bleached white hair, stark against his ubiquitous all-black clothing. He had a look in his face like he knew something, like he was always on the brink of laughter, barely managing to bite it back. At this point in my development, I was working on my sense of irony. I had started to understand the winking subtext of things that had flown over my head when I still needed art to spell everything out for me. I found this so thrilling that I applied my newfound sensibility everywhere, even when it was wildly inappropriate. If I encountered something dangerous or sinister, I assumed there was some kind of commentary being made on danger or sinisterness. I lived in a constructed reality where nothing was actually what it seemed to be. It served me very well sometimes. It also made me a harsh critic. I found the vast majority of the work being presented at my first poetry night at Caffeine painfully sincere. People saying exactly and precisely what they mean, their metaphors over-explained, their literary devices afterthoughts. Most of the time when somebody they read something that was at once unrevealing and a public display of vulnerability so saccharine it grossed me out. My soul, started one poet, and I sat up on my bar stool expectant, is like a flower, they continued, closing their eyes as though unable to fathom the enormity of their own profundity. I slumped in my chair, sipped my beer. I wasn't angry. I was just disappointed. My heart, began another poet, and then again I sat up, ears pricked like an attentive dog, is a muscle. The poet stopped and smirked at the audience knowingly. People went and snapped their fingers in approval. I looked around in shock. What the fuck? I interpreted it all as an attachment to being understood, which I read as cowardice or at least not poetry. Write an essay, I thought bitterly, if you want to make a point. I looked for ambiguity, for space, for the gaps where interpretation could fall and never land, but I didn't find it. None of it made me curious. When Andrew walked up to read, he was cheered on by his entourage, a curly-haired white girl in vintage flapper dress with a long string of pearls and a perfectly painted little rosebud of a red mouth. Next to her was a tall Ojibwe man with a face full of airbrushed makeup, a dozen facial piercings, and the perfectly coiffed barrel curls of a 1940s housewife. Next to him, a kind-faced redhead, person who always had the air of somebody who was headed to the library. Oh, shut up, he said playfully to his friends. No, seriously, shut up. He snapped, suddenly angry at the whole crowd. A nervous hush fell over everyone. He waited, making us squirm. Then the control behind his perpetual smirk gave out, and he broke into peals of high-pitched laughter. The crowd laughed along, relieved. Some people looked pissed. I took a handful of dirty bar peanuts, shoved 3 in my mouth without looking away from him, wide-eyed, delighted, enthralled. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tara. I'm really looking forward to reading that. I'm going to invite our 3 writers to come join me up here in this talk show-like formation. And if you have any questions, they will be happy, or at least willing, to answer them. And for the folks at home, you can put any questions that you have on the threads of the various online platforms where this is streaming. And through the magic of technology, they will come to me via our super tech team, Deanna and John, and they will be answered as well. So come on up. So thank you. I mean, I feel like when we were putting together the new issue, there's always discussion about what are going to be the features, who's going to read at the launch, and I just want to say that with all due humility, we made very good choices. So I'll start just with a few questions. So Tara, I mean, you started off as a poet, obviously, with some inspiration from the local community. And when you were reading, I thought, man, this is so great. And I'm sure many of us have thought that our youth, our misspent youth, was worthy of a memoir. But what pushed you through to actually do it?
Well, I'm still a poet. I make fun because I love. But I think that I was. I guess I just have read a few really good memoirs about being young and stupid recently. So I was just like, why not me, And I think also I was like, I was inspired mostly by like 2 writers, one named Kat Marnell, who wrote a really good addiction memoir called How to Ruin Your Life. Which is mostly about becoming heinously addicted to prescription attention deficit disorder medication, there for the grace of God. And that was mostly about
being very young and making lots of poor, ridiculous choices. And it was really, I just couldn't put it down. I thought it was like really, really compelling. So I was like, wow, amazing. You like don't actually have to have like perspective or like be that much older than the age that you were when you were doing the stuff to write a memoir. You just have to put sentences in an order. That's cool. And then also like, I was reading Joan Didion also, and Joan Didion was just mostly talking about how you write about what you have. And I was like, if that's what I have, then why not, you know? So like,
Yeah, no, good call. So we have a question flying in from Doriana out there in the world. For all the authors, which authors have inspired you most? Start with you, Helen.
I read a lot, and I worked at a bookstore for 5 years, so I can't really put together a succinct list. But I think because this is a collection of short stories, I can say that some short story writers who inspired me are Julio Cortázar, the Argentinian, very famous Argentinian short story writer. Mostly, I'm very into his the structure of his work, and the story that I just read just now was sort of my attempt at a Cortázar-like story. He's very good at merging two or more realities into something extra strange. And otherwise, I read a collection of stories by, oddly enough, another Argentinian writer named Mariana Enriquez, which was called Things We Lost in the Fire, which came out in English a couple years ago. And that the voice in those stories was like a big inspiration for the book as well.
Cool. How about you, Eli? You're next in the docket.
I thought I would be, so I was trying to prepare. I guess in thinking about this book, definitely Trish Sala, who's another trans-Lebanese writer, has been a big inspiration for me, like throughout my writing. And she also edited the book, so that was really great as like a through line. Dionne Brand has been superbly influential on me, especially her Blue Clerk. Who else? I said I was preparing, but
it's a hard question. I find it's like it's a go-to question that a lot of people have, but it always throws you off anyway.
Because you suddenly forget everyone you know.
Yeah, I got a list in my pocket.
Just take it out. But I guess Kai Kello was another person who helped me kind of work through form when I was trying to write The Good Arabs. And then Anne Boyer was really important to me when I was writing my previous book, Not Body, because she writes about illness and gender and kind of is also a poet who's kind of working through these subjects. So I guess that's
cool. That's a good, thorough answer. How about you, Chara?
Yeah, I already mentioned Kat Marnell and Joan Didion. I guess also Fran Lebowitz' comedic writing is also like makes me really happy. I think it's really funny. And also I'm also, my brain's just going totally blank. It's funny, like I literally had people while you were talking, and I was just like, it's gonna be easy. And then I got to speak, and I'm like, wow.
Note to Doriana, this is a hard question.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think of like other, there's also Susan Burton, who wrote a memoir called Empty that I read and loved while I was in the process of writing this book. So I think that one really influenced me a lot as well. The only work by Susan Burton that I've read, but I've really liked it. But yeah, that's my answer. There we go.
Great.
Nailed it.
Feel free to put a hand up if you have questions. I wanted to ask you, Helen, because I found this out reading the MRB feature that you are also a musician. You were in the band Heathers, which I remember hearing about a few years ago. Are you still doing music? And which one of those things started first, or were you doing both writing and music side by side for a while?
Heathers was a band that I was in for 5 to 7 years. I can't remember anymore.
The last 2 years don't.
Yeah, but like I guess luckily we had already been winding down by the time the pandemic started, and the only unfortunate thing was that we were meant to have like a final show, and then we obviously couldn't have that last year, so that was kind of sad. But No, I guess I've been an active musician here probably for like 10 or 15 years. So I was mostly playing music with other people, and the writing, I had like written stories when I was a kid and then just like completely decided that I wasn't good enough until a couple of years ago when I started writing the stories for this book. So yeah, I guess I had a longer time of being an active musician, and now I'm more writing focused, which also happens to be more convenient for a time when it's hard to gather in spaces with other people.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, some people are getting back into it. Others are taking it slow.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say is that writing feels quite solitary, and I do miss being in a band or just like making stuff with other people.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, I've got a question coming in from Anthony for all the authors. What is it about Montreal's character that you believe makes it such a prolific place for writers? And what about Montreal, if anything, has informed or influenced your writing? So let's start with you, Eli.
Well, I mean, I think there's like the material circumstances of Montreal, i.e. it's cheaper to live here, and obviously that's changing. But, you know, I think it has been a hub for artists who want to be able to, you know, work a part-time job, especially when you're starting off as an artist and you're not really making money off your art. It gives you the chance to do that. I actually worked at Caffeine, so that was funny.
Eli's much cooler than I am.
It also was way later than when that started, when you were 20. So. But, you know, it gives you the chance to be able to work a little bit and then have the chance to write and kind of enmesh yourself in writing. So I think that is at least like the material circumstance around it. And I think people gather where other writers are or other musicians or these types of things. And when it comes to like writing, so much of Montreal is in my work. So I do find inspiration from living here, but I think it's because I'm interested in taking kind of everyday life and everyday images and kind of sprinkling it throughout my work. So often when I'm writing, I go back to certain moments of noticing like the way the trees look or the smell, or kind of as like ways to get into writing. So I find, and I've lived in Montreal for 10 years, so it's taken up a lot of my brain space in that way.
For sure. How about you, Tara? Anything you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, I want to like echo the material circumstances thing for sure. And I think also specifically the combination of the material circumstances making it economically viable as like a place to live as an artist, plus it being extremely beautiful. I think that's like the two things together. Like that, like those two things in combination. Plus, there is this spirit of, I almost want to say like generative combativeness that I think is in Montreal, that has like a part of its personality that I think is really excellent for like making me feel excited enough to like want to resolve things with art. I don't know. Does that make sense? There's something about like people always talk about, I read this one person writing about how New York's essential character underneath all of the artifice is magic and sex. Like that's what, like if you just get on that level, then New York makes sense. And I feel like Montreal is like history and yelling, or and like beauty and yelling or something, or food and beauty and yelling. Like, you know, and if you get on that level, then like you can just vibe with it and it's great. And I think those are like really good. Like it's a good energetic beach to be on, to be creating work.
For sure. How about you, Helen?
Yeah, the affordability up until now of living here is huge, obviously, and I think that goes for being a musician or any other kind of, you know, practitioner of art that makes no money. And yeah, I think that it's hard for me to say since this is pretty much the only place I've lived in my adult life, but my sense is that because generally it's affordable to live here without having to work like 80 hours a week, people maybe don't need to be as defined by their day jobs. And I find people tend to have like either multiple jobs or they have a job, but they do, you know, XYZ creative thing on the side. And I think that creates an atmosphere where people are very willing to gather and they're willing to make things and do things. And I think just yeah, it can be combative, which can be great. And it also means it's easier to like try to collab with other people. You know, I feel like if you want to say, I want to put on an event of this type, there's usually other people you can find who like want to put that work in as well. And I think that's why I continue to live here.
Yeah. Okay. So a question in came in around the same time. What part of being in Montreal inspires, which you already answered, or doesn't inspire your writing or poetry? Any of the darker side of Montreal you want?
I had to move to NDG so I would party enough, like less enough to actually graduate. And I think similarly, like honestly, I think that if anything, Montreal is so fun that I sometimes need to like literally lock myself. Like I feel like I sometimes feel like people will come to Montreal and it's possible to die of FOMO here. Like it's possible, like actually, like the FOMO might kill you. Like you might burn out. Like you can do too many drugs, you know, like don't like, you know, you can't go out too many nights in a row and like get very sick. Like don't, you know, you don't have to go to every party. It's like, so like, I feel like that's the hard part of just being like, sometimes it's too much of an inspiring thing is actually overwhelming and you'll go insane.
Anyone want to add to this question from Jaggy about things that don't inspire your writing or poetry?
I was just going to say in response to Tara that I was like, oh, maybe that's why I didn't write anything in my 20s.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, in summer in Montreal, you're like, does anyone have a job? Like, you're like, people are in parks all the time. I'm like, does anyone have a job? And it's hard not to be the person in the park when you should be writing, which, you know, to echo what you're saying.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when summer here, I think winter for me is much more productive. Summer, I'm like taking a 3-month vacation, gonna enjoy the weather while it's still good before we get all depressed. And
it makes sense, I think. Okay, so we've got another question coming through, but I wanted to just see if anyone in this real life meet space wanted to ask a question. You're leaving it all to the people, for the folks joining us from home, which is fine. No pressure. Okay, well, we're
in a similar vein to the questions that have already been asked, I guess, how did the pandemic affect like your writing, whether in terms of what you were writing about or how you were writing, and I don't know, what are you hoping might change as we move out of this weird, you know, time?
So for the folks at home, the question is, how did the pandemic affect your writing, and what are you looking forward to, or how are you feeling about coming out of this pandemic time?
I mean, it certainly has affected the publishing process on many levels, of course. I mean, I think, as everyone knows, it's been very difficult to have launches because of not being able to gather. And of course, people have been very creative and have done things online and have done hybrid things. And in the summer, we could have things outside. But I feel like that was like a difficulty to overcome. And then also there have been all these supply chain issues that are continuing. So there's some difficulties getting things printed on time because there's been a paper shortage. So those are some like material ways in which the pandemic has definitely affected at least my own experience of publishing for the first time. With regards to actually what I've been writing, I don't know if it affected what I was writing about so much, other than the fact that there is a literal pandemic story in the book. I tried to write a pandemic story without saying the word pandemic. So yeah, it of course affected it on that content level, but I might have to be further away from it to answer that more deeply.
I guess for me, I had both books. So I had I'm pretty sure I signed both my book contracts before the pandemic happened. And so when the pandemic happened and had been going on for a bit, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna launch 2 books in a pandemic. And I kind of was pessimistic about my second book coming out post-pandemic, because I think it quickly became obvious that things would continue. But then, you know, I had like these deadlines and I was editing and working on kind of last minute writing. So I really had had to do it. And I think that kind of forced me to write and allowed me to. Whereas now that the books are out, it's been much harder for me to write. And I think the pandemic has definitely affected that, and affected where I can write. Like there's only so much I can do in my house at like the desk in my room. So I think that's definitely, I'm looking forward to a moment where it feels safer to be writing elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that in terms of, so the pandemic affected me physically and emotionally. I'm wrecked and destroyed, obviously. Creatively, I'm doing great, poppin', awesome. Like the book was mostly written under like in lockdown, basically. So like I like got very like this coping mechanism, great, awesome. They were right about you need a creative one or you'll go insane. So that's like in terms of just like creativity, I feel like I really did actually hit a stride when I was like, I actually have to stay inside and I can't leave my house and I might as well write. There's no excuse not to at this point, so I will just do it. But like the issue now is that like I don't want to do anything else and my like arms feel like they're gonna fall off and I'm gonna die, so that hurts. But like I feel like it's not like affected my like the pandemic features has like a tiny little itty bitty cameo role in the book, like so like it doesn't feature in terms of content, but like it's definitely affected the process in that like I actually have one now when I don't feel like I really had a regular one before. So that's cool. But of course it doesn't make any money. So if anyone wants to hand me a large sum of cash so I can keep writing, that would be great. Thank you.
So I think we've got time for one more. And you've touched on this a little bit, but Doriana asks, can you tell us what you are all working on now?
Well, I'm sort of working on a novel. There's a short story in my collection because I decided why not put a short story in my poetry collection just for fun. And so that short story I'm trying to adapt into a larger novel because I felt like I wasn't done with it. And so I'm doing that, but very slowly. So don't expect anything anytime soon.
I'm attempting fiction, which is an endurance-based genre that I'm very impressed by anyone who can do it. So I have a very stupid idea for a vampire novel. So again, large sum of money, please. That's mostly, so mostly fiction.
I am also working on a novel, which has oddly been inspired by, this is something that I started doing during lockdown. It was learning Cantonese, which is very difficult. I decided I would make it even more difficult by somehow incorporating it into my English language writing process. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but that's what I'm working on. I'm also sort of working on a weird poetry series, but I don't know if I will want anyone to read it.
Limited edition.
Very limited.
Okay, well, I think I've got one more question, but I think this will have to be the last one because we have to keep things rolling along. From Layla to all three, do you still have a lot of confidence in books and in mainstream publishing for your careers? Or have you thought or tried things like Twitter stories or other media? Do your friends read and buy books? Signed, Older and Curious. Very hard hitting.
What was it? Do you have any faith in the publishing industry?
Do you still have a lot of confidence in books and in mainstream publishing for your careers? No pressure.
I mean, I don't know if I have much confidence in the fact that like Penguin Random House is eating every publisher that exists. I don't love that. I don't think that's a good thing. But luckily, I've chosen to work with a wonderful small publisher, Metonymy, who are right here. And I think I have a fair amount of confidence in smaller independent publishers and, them having confidence in writers who write, weirder stuff and having like the enthusiasm and follow through to like work on those books and get them out there. And I'm very grateful for that. And also having, what was the other question? Yeah, I do know a lot of people who read, which is nice. And maybe gives me a skewed idea of, what the reading world is sort of the world beyond readership is like. But yeah, and having worked in a bookstore for many years, I felt fairly confident in people's like continued interest in reading, like both physical and audio and digital books for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I love books, and very surprising statement, but I'm still really compelled by buying books and kind of searching for new people to read and searching for old books to read, and I think that there are a lot of people who are doing that, and I think like these events that are like about like reading local and kind of like thinking about who around you is writing are super important, and I think small publishers are really important as well. And like all these ways that we're trying to kind of go against this, like what you were talking about with Penguin and any other like massive publishing houses, where we're trying to think about like who isn't being chosen to be published, and like why is that the case, and how can I get access to those people, because I am interested in more weirder things, or like writing by BIPOC and queers who aren't getting publishing opportunities, and obviously that's changing a little bit, and I think we maybe have a skewed view of that because it seems like it's changing rapidly, but I think there's still a lot of work to do, and I'm kind of deviating from the question, but I do have faith in that, and faith in people like the three of us who are writers but also avid readers, and who are working with like we all work with magazines and presses and stuff to kind of continue this work.
Yeah, I definitely think that books are always going to have I think they're always going to have a niche in the way that because like book people are crazier than vinyl people are crazy. Like book people are crazier than that. Like it's just like literally like there's so many books in my house. It's a fire hazard, and I'm not stopping anytime soon. So like and like there's half of those books I haven't read, and I won't stop buying more of them. Like it's a compulsion. It's an addiction. I can't stop, and I won't stop, but I'm not sure how to stop. So I think that's like, and I do think that there's enough like people with horrible problems like me that to keep the publishing industry afloat, just that alone. I do think I am like excited by the prospect of other kinds of ways of publishing. There's just like a little teenage zinester in me that just wants to find other ways to be like, read this dumb thing that I wrote that no one else cares about. So like I publish on Substack, and like I have a Twitter, and I have an Instagram, and I like literally can't stop oversharing. So like there's like those things I think are really cool. I'm always skeptical of the when it becomes this like thing where like artists need to just constantly be like performing and connecting all the time as like a desperate like please I can't pay my rent. So like I don't want that to like be the reason why people are doing this kind of stuff. Like, and I like, so for me a lot of my hope for the future of like publishing and writing is making sure that there's like that there like the economic barriers that exist for writers are not there as much anymore. Universal basic income would be a great start.
Well, thank you. I think that's all we have time for, but don't go away. There's still more to come for the folks right here and the folks joining us at home. But let's give a hand to our invited writers. That was great. I'm going to invite up our publisher, Rebecca West, who is going to say a few things.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you to all of our wonderful readers and to all of you for coming out into the real world. Really wonderful to see all of you here. I'm Rebecca West. I joined the Montreal Review of Books in May of this year, which feels both like a long time ago and not so long ago. also the executive director of our parent organization, ALAC, the Association of English Language Publishers of Quebec. I have a few prizes to give out, which is fun, from our very generous partners and donors, Rain Coast Books and Paragraph Books. If people in the room would like to look underneath your chair, one of you has something underneath it. Anyone find an envelope underneath their chair? It should be near the front. Woo! Yes! We have a winner. Here is a bag of goodies. And we also have a prize to give away to our online audience. Okay, great. Our online winner, thank you to our online audience for participating in the chat, is Gina Reitman. So we'll be in touch with you to figure out how to pick that up. Tonight, we're also celebrating our dear Mélanie Grandin, who has been the Montreal Review of Books editor for 10 years. Round of applause for Mel. Mel announced in the pandemic that I think, she wanted to pass on the reins to a new editor. So it's a big milestone for us at the MRB. Mel was one of the first people I met in this role, and from day one made me feel super welcome, even though all of our meetings were on the phone and on Zoom. It's really been an honor to work together. I think I can say that on behalf of everyone at the MRB. I think your passion, not only for Quebec literature, but really the craft of editing, comes through in every issue. We've gathered a few messages from the MRB community over the years, past staff and team members as a tribute to Mel's tenure. And I'd like to share a few of them with you this evening. And honestly, you may be able to suss out who wrote these, but so these are just a few quotes from past team members and some current ones. Mel, in the past year, I've had the pleasure of working with you, doing some of my favorite things, picking apart sentences, arguing over word choices, debating whether references are too obscure or just right, and contemplating whether a grammatical rule should be followed or ignored for the sake of writerly flair. Your eagle eye for detail, ability to cite chapter and verse from the Chicago Manual of Style, and intimate knowledge of the local literary landscape have been incredibly inspiring. Another quote from our team, Mel is one of the greatest prose chiselers I've had the pleasure of working with, skilled at drilling words, connective tissue to cut away despair. Editor extraordinaire who presents us to the world in our best pressed literary shirts, we will miss you. Over the years and the many reviews, Mel has guided me towards becoming a better writer. As an editor, she combines a meticulous eye for detail, an unerring ear for the illogical and the vague, and a gentle kindness that makes the corrections and questions so much easier to take. No matter how many books were up for consideration or whether there was a new associate editor or publisher to help learn the ropes at the MRB, you were our rock. And finally, it's hard to imagine the MRB without you, but it's a testament to your hard work and devotion that's kept going this long and will keep going into the future. So Mel, we've put together, with the help of our talented designer, David, a little tribute booklet with even more of these, thoughts from the MRB team. And I'd like to invite you up to say a few words if you feel like it.
Wow, okay. Thank you so much. I wasn't expecting that. I knew you'd say a few words. You did warn me, but I wasn't expecting quotes like that. And I cry at commercials, so I'll try not to cry now. I'm not much of a public speaker, so it'll be very short. I just want to say thank you very much. Thank you, Rebecca, and David for doing this. The last well, if I add the associate editor role, I was there for more than 12 years, and they were great years. I learned a lot. I met a lot of great people, a lot of great authors and publishers, reviewers, made a lot of new friends. It was a great experience, and I hope that Malcolm gets to enjoy the experience as much as I did. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Like I said, I'm not a public speaker, so thank you very much. And yeah.
Yeah, so just once again, a really big thank you to our readers this evening. Round of applause for you guys. Thank you to everyone watching us online. We're experimenting with this hybrid format of events, and we welcome any feedback that anyone in the room or anyone online has about that. And of course, yeah, everyone, a big thank you to everyone who made this fall issue possible. Outgoing editor Mel, current editor Malcolm Fraser, our designer David, who's here tonight, our ad sales manager in Toronto, Michael Weil, as well as all of our reviewers, photographers, illustrators, and our board of directors. As you may know, this is part of our week of events at the Holiday Book Fair. I'm deeply grateful to my fellow Holiday Book Fair team members, some of whom are here tonight, Elise and Emma, and our great tech team, John and Deanna. Our partners, the QWF, the Violet Hour, and Paragraph Bookstore. Please pick up a book on your way out, and you can have it signed. And of course, our funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Canadian Heritage, and SODEC for making this evening possible. And I hope to see you tomorrow evening. We have another great online event with Marie-Claire Blais and Katia Grubisic. And on Thursday, Thompson Highway and Anne-Marie McDonald at St. Jack's, just down the road. So hope to see you there. Thanks a lot.
Yes.